Welcome back to the FG NA+T turbo conversion, where this is the 6th and final episode.
Yep, and this one's going to be a bit lengthy. We take the car back down to Checker Tuning to test out the wastegate spring and the injectors. We also come across a few problems, and I'm going to start talking about the solutions, how we overcome them.
Yeah, and we've also actually developed some products. You may have seen throughout the series where we were using prototypes and made some brackets and things here or there. So if you wait till the end of the episode, we will show the products to specifically use on the FG NA+T.
Let's go.
We are back from Checker Tuning with a running, driving NA to turbo Falcon. We ended up with 289.58 kilowatts.
Again with the little details on the decimals.
Yeah, need them.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at all the dyno sheets and run through all the details.
Okay, here we have the results from the dyno tune from Checker Tuning. Here we have engine torque and power, and that's replicated on both sheets here. As you can see that there is a bit of an elephant in the room here with these massive dips going on here. So we originally went in to tune the car with the factory settings on the butterfly flap on the FG NA intake manifold, and this is what it's produced. So we were a little unhappy with that in the beginning, going, oh, let's see if we can flatten that curve out a bit. So we started playing around with it. We initially disconnected the vacuum to it and blanked it off. And these two here are the curves that it produced. As you can see, there is a significant difference between the torque there and power as well. So we were like, okay, let's see if we can fine tune that in terms of opening up the butterfly earlier or later. Opening up the butterfly flap earlier produced this curve here, and later produced this blue line here. As you can see, yet again, still not as strong as the factory FG settings, so we've opted for that. You can see that there is a massive correlation with the dip in torque to the dip in power here. You're probably thinking like, oh, you know, what's going on? It's probably not going to feel great. When I drove the car on the street and gave it a good squirt, honestly, I didn't notice this. If I'd never seen the dyno sheet, I wouldn't imagine that was actually happening. So I'm pretty happy with it. So we're going to move on to the boost and manifold pressure. So this bottom one here is our boost pressure, and this is our exhaust manifold pressure. We initially were going in with this exhaust manifold expecting, you know, to be less than 2-to-1 ratio of boost to exhaust manifold pressure, and we have a total of 13 psi here, which is described there, and we have about 21 psi. So that's putting us under the bracket of that 2-to-1 which we wanted to achieve. So we're happy with the flow of this manifold. The next thing that we're going to notice here is this is our boost curve. It does at about 3,900 begin to skyrocket. What that means to me is that the wastegate is not flowing enough, and as it hits 3,900, it will just continue increasing boosts. Ideally, we would like this 6 psi across the board, but this is the result we've got. Now, the next issue we found is up here. At 13 psi, we are hitting valve float, unfortunately. So the idea is that we are going to do some modifications to the turbo and try to bring that down a little bit. And we're going to install a boost controller and try bring up the base pressure that we're going to run and try balance it out at around 10 psi. So back to the valve float. Here we are at 13 psi. What we're going to do now is chop to a video showing you what it actually looks like at 13 pounds in valve float. All right, so we're hitting valve float and it's less than ideal. We're hitting valve float at 13 PSI and it's not 100% of the time. We did multiple runs and it was about 80% of the time at 13 pound that it did hit the valve float. I wish I could say to you that the 13 pound is the magic number, and if you want to, avoid it, stay below it. I can't do that. We've got guys out there running, 8 PSI hitting valve float all the way up to 15 PSI. So unfortunately, that 13 is just for our motor.
Yeah, so the logical choice here would be to change the valve spring, but because we're testing the internet theory here of the stock internals, we're going to keep the factory NA valve springs in and try lower that boost level down. So after speaking to Trent at Checkered Tuning, he has recommended to port out the wastegate hole itself. He has done this on multiple cars that he has tuned and has seen some good results on it. So let's get the turbo off and see how we go.
Let's go. All right, so this is a little bit of a post-editing video. We realized we weren't exactly 100% clear on what exactly we were doing. So basically in the origins, we were saying that we were going to use a bolt-on solution to work out how to turbo your Barra. We've realized now that this is actually probably the limitations of the products we're using, which is fine and it works. There are ways to work around this, like if you want to run an external gate and put, I don't know, valve springs in for this instance, yeah, you could fix all our issues pretty simply, but it's not a bolt-on solution. So we're going to pivot a little bit now, and what we're going to do is we're going to really try optimize the products that we have. So we're going to, modify the turbo, modify the wastegate, whatever it may be, to try actually achieve what we want of 10 pounds we're thinking at the moment. And yeah, so you guys are going to see the results and of what we achieve and things like that, and we're going to go from there.
This is the wastegate port here. As you can see, the color difference between the rear housing and where the sealing surface is. So that's where the wastegate flapper actually sits on the rear housing and seals. So there's a little bit of meat on that, which we're going to try to take out as much material as we can and leave enough so it still has a sealing surface and give us a bit more flow through that port.
Alrighty, I've just finished reassembling the turbo after porting the wastegate. As you can see, the port is significantly larger. It is probably to the extremes that we can push it for this wastegate flapper. It's pretty much a simple job, just hit it with a die grinder. Tried to focus on, if this will focus, on these internal walls and just make them a lot smoother and sort of make them parallel with the hole that I've ground out, and yeah, that's the finished job there.
So just a quick note of the porting on the rear housing. When you're doing the actual hole itself, the flapper side where the hinge is, you want to kind of stay away from the hinge side, because what can happen is when the flap wants to close, it can bind on itself and it will just basically cause the flap to stick open a little bit, which essentially will cause you boost lag.
Yeah, now the other thing we noticed is when we were reassembling the turbo, that there was a little bit of scoring on the clevis itself. So we worked out that when the actuator was fully extended, it seemed to be binding up a little bit on that flapper arm itself. So what we're going to do to sort of, hit as many points as we can in one, dyno tune, I'm going to fabricate up a bracket to reposition the wastegate itself so that it doesn't have that fouling issue anymore, and we'll see where that takes us.
So this is the wastegate flapper here and where the actuator will sit. Realistically, we want as much opening as we can on this for as much flow as possible. So with the Pulsar wastegate and bracket that it comes with the turbo, when it's actually in the position of the factory FG with the manifold and everything, the housings need to be clocked and you're very limited to where this actuator can sit once it's on the turbo. So when we've got it all clocked up, we are left with something like that. So you've got 2 bolt holes there and this angle here, and when that's roughly on in this position, that's the angle. What we found is that we're binding on ourselves, and that is as much as this will open, which is very limiting for the flapper. So if you can see around here, that's all we get for exhaust gas or wastegate flow. So Chris has fabbed up a prototype bracket here. We've tried different positions and making it work to where we think we're going to get maximum throw out of that actuator. So we'll bolt it all up now and show the difference between the position that it was to where we've got it now.
Okay, so this is the assembled version of the prototype that I've made. You're probably asking, why is there a bit of an offset here? I didn't want to bore you guys with me sitting there with a pair of verniers and a steel rule and a grinder just cutting some steel out. So essentially made the top plate, and I made a bit of an educated guess. Essentially I was a touch off. And then I started playing with some angles after that, and this is what I've come up with. So I found this to be a nice position for the gate. So when you extend it now, Mez showed you before that this is like significantly more than it was before. So it's no longer binding up on anything, and we have a lot more travel out of the gate. We're going to chuck this on the Falcon. We're actually going to physically test it as it sits here. If it does prove successful, I will draw it up in CAD and I will get it laser cut and CNC folded so we can have a good finished product.
Turbo's back together, back on the car and ready to go. So we're going to head back to Trenton Cats. We're not going to bore you with any filler of getting it there and putting it on the dyno this time. So we're just going to go straight to the dyno run. So there we have it. With Trent's nod of approval, we are below valve flow. We have a tuned, running, finished FG NA+T. So let's go through the dyno results.
All right, here we have the results from the dyno we just previously did. We came to a total of 274.67 kilowatts. You gotta count those decimals for Mez. And we made a total of 514.33 Newton meters, which we're pretty happy with. Now, there's three curves here. We ultimately ended up with this one here. We did introduce some boosts, like we said in a previous video, that gave us this curve here. So we started playing with the intake runners a little bit more because we were a little bit worried about how hard that torque hit early on because of rods and NA things. So we played around with it. This one ended up being the best. It reduced the dip in torque, significantly as opposed to down here and here, which resulted in quite a smooth power curve. Feels great, really can't complain about it. Now, looking at the boost curve itself, this is where you can see we have introduced some boost with a boost T. There's not as much boost creep, which is good. And the mods we did for the turbo did do something. It has reduced the boost by 1 to 2 PSI. We are at the limitations of what we think we can do with the internal gate and a 4-inch dump. But to circumnavigate it, you could always put a 50mm external gate on it and you could probably get a bit better curve there. Overall, the car performs well, drives great, and we love it.
So as Chris said, we love it. The car drives fantastic. We've probably done, 2,000 Ks since since the tune, and it has been flawless. The car drives day to day for our parts duty, and then when we want the power, it is there. So super, super happy with it.
Yeah, now one of the things we mentioned in our very first episode is we were going to do a percentage comparison. You actually wouldn't read about it. It is actually 100% power increase on the nose.
We doubled power.
Yeah, with 134 kilowatt, was it?
Yeah, around that.
About that, yep.
Yep.
Now, if you want to compare power to price, this has cost us around just under $7,000. That's retail prices if you were to buy each part individually, not into kits though.
Yeah, well, on that note with kits, so we developed some parts for an FG NA+T conversion. throughout the whole series, there were some bits and pieces that we were developing and weren't happy with how things have fit. So we're going to make a little mini kit series because obviously everyone's conversion is different. Some people want to go external gate, some people want to use secondhand parts as well. So we're not against obviously going that route. You do whatever you want with your build, and these little mini kits will make you or let you choose those items to suit your build. So we can have a waterline kit, oil line kit, the intercooler piping, whatever you need. And here's some of the products that we've looked into. So the main one we're going to start off with is the intercooler piping.
Here are 3 silicon joiners that we've had produced, and 2 are actually very specific to the NA+T FG build that we've done. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the 150mm 2.5 inch. The reason why we've had this one produced is because the Auto Technica kit itself comes with a silicon joiner to suit the FG turbo. What we've had to do is rotate the pipe that goes up to the throttle body a little bit so we can clear the NA manifold, and as a result it now hits the battery relocation. So what we've had to do is extend it a little bit, and that's why it's 150mm. Now as we come up that pipe, we have the 90 degree to the throttle body. We did try an off-the-shelf 90 degree bend, and look, it does work, but it does actually rub that intake pipe on the manifold. So what we've done is just increase that leg length to give us the clearance we need. Now, with the product as a whole, we have noticed that there is a bit of movement in the pipe now. So it gets a little bit close to the AC line. So what we've done is we've got a bit of rubber hose, we've put it on top of the AC line, which runs along the rail. And if there is any rubbing or any vibrations that we can't see, it's not going to damage the AC line and it's not going to damage the pipe.
For the third silicon joiner, we have a 4-inch 67 degree. Now this one isn't specific to the NA+T, it's just simply designed to fit a 4-inch inlet turbo in a factory position. You can use an off-the-shelf silicon joiner, but the leg length is too long and you will need to cut it down. So on the same route of us keeping the bolt-on solution, we have just designed a shorter leg length, and all you'd simply need to do is get a pipe to go to your pod filter, and it's all bolt-on. Now onto the intercooler bushes. We approached 10mm Garage to 3D print us up these bushes. They are made out of polyurethane with a stainless steel crush tube. These are designed to be used in the intercoolers that retain factory rubbers. The reason we went down this route is simply the Ford ones are just really expensive and they're just hard to come by when you're buying 4 of them. So we have basically printed up the solution for them, and they do come with an optional bolt kit for the NA+T.
And on to the final 3 products. We have the CNC billet water tee fitting, the wastegate spring, and the wastegate bracket. The wastegate spring, we made a whole bunch of them. They're 5 psi, plus or minus a little bit depending on how much preload. You can see in a previous video of how it was installed and how it worked. Moving on to the wastegate bracket, it is a CNC folded and laser cut bit of steel, which is basically the final version of the prototype that I made.
So lastly, we have the CNC machined T-piece fitting. So this is for the water feed for the turbo. This piece actually replaces the factory plastic T in the heater lines there. It's a huge thing with the NA+ community. It's like, where do you get water from? And this solution here, -6 straight out from that T into your turbo. So there we have it. That's all the products that we have developed for the NA+T. So you'll find these on our website at BarraTheWorld.com under the conversions tab. There'll be an NA+T section. And you'll also notice that in that section, we don't actually have the Fabricators Warehouse manifold listed because unfortunately they're no longer making manifolds, but we have replaced it with the PSR factory cast replica, which is a huge benefit because they're cheaper and you can use the factory heat shields.
Yeah, now on that note, this actually concludes all the episodes. We have a fully functional NA+T car. It's awesome. It's made 100% power increase, which, you know, you can't beat it. No. And like, it's been reliable as, like, how many Ks have you done it now?
5,000 Ks, picking up engines, running around. Yep.
No leaks, no flaws, no error codes, no nothing. So everything's hunky-dory, and yeah, we're happy with it.
Yeah, so this was actually our first YouTube series that we've ever done with anything in our lives, so we really enjoyed it. All you guys liking, commenting, and interacting, we really enjoyed it. So on this video, chuck us a comment on what you would like to see coming up. We have a few ideas that we're throwing out there, but if you guys have some suggestions, we're more than happy to delve into it and show you what you actually want to see. So make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll see you then.